wondering, is nobody coming tonight? And there you are. So we are still caring as community, and it's wonderful that we are together. We need each other more than ever in times like these, where we are shaking outside and inside, I feel. Anyway, welcome, Warami. Please, everybody say after me, Warami, which means welcome. Warami. And if we can, let's say also Warami Mitiga. Mitiga means my friends. So can we say that together? Warami Mitiga. Wonderful. It's so good to show respect in just these little tiny ways of learning a couple of words, such as Warami Mitiga and digitally, which is thank you. Later we can learn that. We plan to have each time a few words and sentences that we learn and show respect to a most welcoming culture that you can probably find anywhere, and forgiving as well. And like Ray was going to call his section resistance, resilience, and respect. That all belongs together. And before we do anything else, we miss our person that was doing the welcome to country as a Darug person for Bulbanora, which is the clan here of the Darug nation. So Ray kindly agreed to do the welcome to country for us.
Scary. I'm from the Kabi people on my dad's side, and Gurung on my mum's side, and I also have deep cultural connections to the people from Embram Island, where my grandfather was taken as a 12-year-old along with 60,000 others brought into Australia here. So I have those wonderful connections to those particular spaces and places on our little planet here. And let us then acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of this particular country. And in particular, I think it's the Barramadigal people up here, of the Darug Nation. And as a first and traditional custodian of the land on which we are meeting tonight, and we acknowledge our gratitude that we share this land today, our sorrow for the cost of that sharing, and our hope that we can move towards a place of justice and partnership together. Thank you.
Thank you. Hopefully nothing happened to Marlene Corbett, who was the one who was coming. I hope next time she might be here. Yeah, so tonight is the opening of our series that we call Building Bridges. And Reconciliation for Western Sydney, if I might give a few introductory remarks. We started in 1997, and we have done many public events, small and large, sometimes even with the town hall over 500 people. And our particular concern was, such as ANTAR, to give Indigenous people a voice and listen to what they have experienced and whatever knowledge, wisdom they want to share. And one of those events was a series we called originally Walking Together, and then soon Building Bridges. And the purpose is that they are heard in their own voice rather than being talked about, and that the rest of us, whether old migrants or newer migrants, can learn and listen and come home in a new way for a partnership that is built on equality and justice and respect, and includes, of course, truth-telling and all that. Okay, so there we are today. The first session is about setting the context for where we are now. Some of us are quite depressed still from the referendum, no, but it's also a wake-up call to look further or beyond what was before or whatever, and inherit the past in a new way in order to be deeper about building the future of real partnership and really pathways of respectful partnerships. So we are very happy to have 3 different presenters tonight, and each one of them contributes in a very different way to us learning how to move forward. And I welcome Catherine, one of our younger members in Reconciliation for Western Sydney, to introduce them.
Thanks, Rev, and thank you, Maria. So Lola Forester. Oh, I will. So Rev Ray Minniecon explained his heritage. Well, he just shared his heritage earlier, so I'll just go on to say he's a community pastor with St John's Anglican Church in Glebe, where he runs the Scar Tree Indigenous Ministries. That's a community where Indigenous people can integrate their rich heritage in their walk with Jesus. Ray is also director of Bungie Consultancies, which supports Aboriginal leadership and business initiatives. He's developed projects for the survivors of Kinchela Boys Home and the Bomaderry Aboriginal Children's Home. He's also co-chair of Indigenous Peoples Organisation, and that's looking at climate change and human rights.
And very lifelong advocate for justice. Yes.
Alrighty.
Yes, for generations, and all over the country, out of Wentworthville NSW.
Lola Forester is a Euroborough and South Sea Island woman. She's had an extensive career in Indigenous media, including 20 years at SBS, hosting programs like First in Line and the Aboriginal program. She's currently a presenter and producer for Koori Radio on 93.7 FM. Finally, I must confess I pulled this straight from the web, so I'm not sure if you wrote this, Blake. But Blake Cansdale is a proud Anaiwan man living on the Central Coast. He's the National Director of ANTAR. Dedicated to empowering First Nations communities, Blake has a background in legal practice with experience in public policy, lecturing, Aboriginal affairs, business management, Aboriginal land planning and development, land acquisition and land management. We're so grateful to have you here tonight. I'll give them up to you.
It's wonderful to have you share with us what's important in life today in Australia. What's important to all of us, past, present and future. Thank you so much, and Ray, we want you to start. We have, some of you might have, thank you. I'm not sure if people picked up the timeline of reconciliation, the public timeline that we put out there. It's 3 full pages of events that happened over the past 30 plus years, particularly since the bicentennial in this case, so the Reconciliation Council started. But of course, it's much, much longer, because since 1788, Aboriginal people have worked on getting rights and working on reconciliation and building a new basis for understanding. Anyway, so if you didn't get it, maybe we can pass it around to more. Anyway.
Thanks. Thank you for this invitation. I really appreciate it. I just want to acknowledge another person from here, one of the original founders of the Reconciliation Group out here in Parramatta, and that's Mr. Tom Main. And I know Tom's not here tonight, but I know Tom very, very intimately. He's been an advocate for Aboriginal people even before I met him. And he was a guy that I met in a forum like this way back in the early 1990s. And he knew more about me than I knew about myself. Because he had all this stuff that he had studied and the books that he had written and all those things. And because I was the director of World Vision's Aboriginal programs, I invited him to come and work for us. And so he was one of my first employees. And I employed him as one of our consultants there on a whole range of things. And he was a brilliant man. And I know he was one of the ones who founded this particular group here as well. So I just want to pay my deepest respects to Tom. And the other thing about Tom too is he has probably the biggest private library on Indigenous peoples in this country that anyone has ever seen. And so I love him and his wife. And I do respect what he has started here for you guys. In terms of tonight, you do have that whole reconciliation outline there of all the things that have happened. And I thought, oh, gee whiz, what do you want me for? And it's a brilliant outline too. Thank you for coming up with something like that. That's something that Tom would do. He would make sure that we got the information that we needed about Indigenous peoples in this country. And he'd spell it out very clearly for everybody concerned. When I was with World Vision, I started what's called the Indigenous Leadership Journal. It's one of the first ones we started. And he was our editor for that, to make sure that we could get the stories, put them in our Indigenous Leadership Journal. I think we had about 40 of them that we had before we closed it down, or before I was closed down, really. Anyway, it's another story. Tonight, I would just share a few things that me personally I've seen happen and have been a part of that has impacted, I think, not only my own life, but has been a huge big impact on the things that have happened in this country. I'm going to start with 4 incredible declarations, and then I'll explain why they're very important. These are the 4 declarations. I want to declare that all Indigenous peoples are entitled, as against the whole world, to possession, occupation, use, and enjoyment of the lands of their ancestors. Number 2, I want to declare that all Indigenous peoples are not outsiders or foreigners in their own lands. They are the descendants of the first peoples of their country, the original inhabitants, and they are to be recognised as such. Thirdly, I want to declare that none of the events of invasion, settlement, federation, or the advent of foreign citizenship laws have displaced the unique position of Indigenous peoples with their lands. And I also want to declare that Indigenous peoples have a unique connection to their country. It is not just ancestry or place of birth or even both. Indigenous peoples have a connection with the land, waters and skies under Indigenous laws and customs. And no imposed Citizenship Act has removed or modified that connection. No parliament or foreign government has removed or modified that connection by any other laws or legislation. 4 declarations that were made by the High Court of Australia in relationship to Indigenous peoples. The first one you would have recognised. It's the 3rd part of the declaration made on the Mabo decision. I've embellished it a bit to include all Indigenous peoples because that decision did set a precedent for land rights. So I'll read it again, but there is one word missing in it. And I wonder if you could tell me what that word is. I want to declare, this is the High Court of Australia in the Mabo decision, which I've embellished. I want to declare that all Indigenous peoples are entitled, as against the whole world, to possession, occupation, use and enjoyment of the lands of their ancestors. To me, that is one of the most definitive definitions of sovereignty that you could ever find. If you were to take those four things and put them as a definition of sovereignty for the French or the British or the Spanish, that's the four things that they would actually say that's what sovereignty means to us. But there's one word missing, which would make it completely a sovereignty definition. What do you think that word is?
Forever. Forever.
Yeah, forever's in it, yeah.
Something about responsibility to look after the land, possibly?
That's embedded in there already.
Unceded.
Unceded, that's embedded in those four words. Possession, occupation, use, and enjoyment. That's what you guys got too.
Bit of a covered boy away from skylights. It just speaks the way. Now, ancestors born in this land. Country.
That's already embedded in that definition, those four words.
Something to do with connection.
That's embedded. That's embedded. And when you have those four things, you are free to be who you are to be.
Ancestry.
That's embedded.
Constitution.
That's embedded.
Tell us, right?
Is it something
We give up.
The word that's missing in it is the word defence. Defend. If I were to read it again and put those words in, you'll understand how powerful the definition of sovereignty is in this particular declaration from the Mabo decision. I declare that all Indigenous peoples are entitled, as against the whole world, to possession, occupation, use, and enjoyment and defence of the lands of their ancestors. Now, the reasons why that word defend is not in there is that it would have undermined the whole of the Australian nation's constitution and the rule of law, as well as the Crown. And then you would not have this nation called Australia under that particular definition. But because they could not put that definition in there, is because the High Court of Australia was under the auspices or the powers of the Parliament, and they could not override or overturn their bosses. But that would make this particular definition complete in terms of understanding what sovereignty really means. I'll read it again because it's such an important part of Australian history for me, and it's a landmark decision that if I put that word defence in there, it makes it so much more real when I say I'm a sovereign owner of my own country, because I have all of those wonderful aspirations that are in this. I can declare that all Indigenous peoples, the Kabi people, the Koori people, my ancestors were in the Glasshouse Mountains, awful. Sunshine Coast, yeah. That's why I'm always smiling, sunshine. Yeah. That's Bundaberg North, yeah. That's my country. It's my mother's country. I was born on my mother's country. Possession, occupation, use, enjoyment, defence of the lands of our ancestors. You cannot get a better definition of sovereignty than that. The other declaration that I made, the other three, declaration of what Indigenous peoples are not outsiders or foreigners in their own lands, was a decision by the High Court that was made in just during the COVID period, I think in 2021, and that was the case that Love and Tromp won against the Commonwealth. Now, Love and Tromp were two young Aboriginal guys who had foreign parentage in New Zealand, and according to the federal laws that even govern the Maori people of New Zealand, or all the criminals of New Zealand, Article, I think it was 501, they would be exporting all the New Zealand criminals out of Australia back to New Zealand. You remember that time period?
Yeah.
Well, they fitted underneath that particular article. And so they took their case to the High Court and says, no, we're Aboriginal. We belong to this country. And because of that heritage, I don't come under that act. And so when I read this act again, or this particular declaration, you'll understand the power of this particular declaration, because the Mabo decision was about land rights. This particular decision was about identity rights. That nobody can take away my identity. I want to declare that all Indigenous peoples, this is the High Court of Australia saying this, not me, are not outsiders or foreigners in their own lands. They are the descendants of the first peoples of their country, the original inhabitants, and they are to be recognised as such. Welcome to country. I also want to declare that none of the events of invasion, settlement, federation, or the advent of foreign citizenship laws have displaced the unique position of Indigenous peoples with their lands. And thirdly, I want to declare, this is the High Court again, declaring that Indigenous peoples have a unique connection to their country. It is not just ancestry or place of birth or even both. Indigenous peoples have a connection with the land, waters and skies under Indigenous laws and customs. And no imposed Citizenship Act, including Section 501, has removed or modified that connection. No parliament or foreign government has removed or modified that connection by any other laws or legislation. So I know who I am, and I know that this is my land, and I know that I'm a sovereign owner, based on those two High Court decisions. Now, the Love and Tromp one didn't create much of a kerfuffle in this country. There was, I think, the South Australian government wanted to have a go at it and, get the High Court to remove this particular declaration, but it went south. But I know who I am in this country. And the fact of the matter is that we've been fighting for that kind of identity as well as those kind of land rights, since 1788. And here is the High Court of Australia saying, okay, we'll give it to you in these declarations. 4 declarations. They were, they're declarations. You can say it like that, but I'm going to say it a different way and saying, I want to say it for me, not for them. I could give a stuff what they do. They've already declared. Yeah. They've already declared who I am and that this is my land. And I'm satisfied with that identity and that dignity.
Can you send this to us?
They're public, they're law.
Yeah.
They're law,
You
yeah,
have to
they're
find-
public.
You have to find it out.
It's just that I embellished a bit of it to
He summarized it so well. I
Yeah.
know how to.
And it's because of those that I have the right to live our lives in peaceful existence with all human families. We have the right to access, live and walk on the sacred lands of our ancestors and touch Mother Earth that has been faithfully cared for by our ancestors. We have the right to live with the bounty of Mother Earth, and we have the right to be who our Creator made us to be and live in the freedom of who our Creator made us to be, based on those two wonderful, beautiful things there, which we've already expressed for the last, I don't know how many hundreds of years. But now it's been solidified or recognised by the High Court of this country in such a powerful way.
Great reminder, and the challenge and the gift that's in there. Thank you. We have to move to the next person.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'll just finish with one other thing too, one other thing that was really important. And I was brought up under the Aboriginal Protection and Restriction of the Sale of Opium Act, 1897. So I was brought up underneath that. And I just wanted to read one paragraph of that particular act for your benefit. And it's Article 11 of that act. It says this: it shall not be lawful for any person other than an Aboriginal, not being a superintendent or a person acting under his direction and not being a person authorised under the regulations, to enter or remain or be within the limits of a reserve upon which Aborigines are residing for any purpose whatsoever. Any person without lawful excuse entering or remaining or being upon such reserve as aforesaid shall, for every such offence, be liable on conviction to a penalty not exceeding £50 or to imprisonment for any term not exceeding 3 months, and the proof of such a lawful excuse shall be upon the person charged. So if we're having this meeting when I was a young child in Queensland, you would all be arrested.
I'm second.
That's true.
Yes, protocol.
I asked you. Okay.
Well, I was introduced by background at the beginning, Lola Forester. I grew up on Gubbi Gubbi country, and then I went to business college in a place called, Bragle country, and then I moved to Cansdale, and then I came back to Sydney and lived on Durham country, and now I live in I'm losing my voice here. On Medical country. So I grew up in Nambour. It's a nice little redneck town, sugarcane town. Then I went to business college. We were lucky that I grew up in Queensland because they educated us up there, even though that, as we say, America has the deep south, we have the deep north. So I just thought that when I left school, which I didn't like school, I just went to school to play sport. So I went to business college because I was one of the first to get an Aboriginal scholarship in the 70s, where they gave you $1.50 a week to go to high school, and then they paid for you to go to business college in Brisbane. So then I thought, well, racism stopped. And then I found out when to try and get a job in Brisbane, it was too hard. So I said to my parents, I will go to Sydney and they won't know what I am, and I'll be able to get a job there. Well, at first I mixed with Europeans, Greeks, Italians, because we had Italians in the family in Queensland because they brought the Italians to cut sugarcane. So I mixed with them until I found out more about Aboriginal people, and I worked in the corporate world until I was 30, and then I managed to get into SBS and be on the first magazine show called First in Line. We called it First in Line because we have too many nations, so we couldn't give it a name, from one nation. So that was kind of good. I didn't grow up with an understanding of the history of our people and of South Sea Island people, because we were a combination in Queensland of Aboriginal South Sea Islanders. So I had roots from Tanna in Vanuatu and Lungi Lungi in Malaysia in Solomons. We talked about the Constitution. The Constitution is an all-white policy where it stopped people of colour, they used to say, and yellow fellas, which was the Chinese, the Asians, which we'd always worked with and had associations with for many centuries. And it was really important. So if you go to the top end, you'll always see Aboriginal Chinese or Malays or whatever it may be, a very good mixture, and also a lot of Chinese food the further north you go. So people must understand that the Asians were here way before the Europeans came here. I found it really great going to Sydney because I worked with a French shipping company for 4 years and spoke French. I didn't have my own language, but I actually had a foreign language. And that was really interesting because I love French. It was just so good to be able to speak another language, but you know, the French were very arrogant too. Men were very arrogant. So you get to learn the differences. It's like I always say, Australia is like Europe. You take all the countries of Europe and you put it into Australia, which has happened. A lot of you mob came here for freedom. When you mob came here for freedom, we lost our freedom. And the one thing that the English or the British did was called you migrants, and they're still calling people migrants today. But if it wasn't for the Europeans, this country wouldn't be as strong as it is. And I get sick of people saying, you know, migrants, English, whatever it may be. But what I say to people is, you've got to realise that you have more in common with us than you do with the British. People have their language. They have, you know, the great food you brought here, thank goodness. Otherwise we'd be living off bangers and mashed potato. Which you like, but when you think of it, you know, there are people that have been here for generations that still have their language, still have their culture, still cook their food. Well, the boomer generation, the younger generation are virtually assimilating into takeaway foods, you know, and technology. But it's so important that we need to come together. Why is it that Australia is mainstream, multicultural, and then Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander? You know, we were always multicultural, and we're even more multicultural. And I think people need to understand that. I mean, when I look at, with reconciliation, I was there when Paul Keating made that statement in Redfern Park. And that was just, there were tears, there were jaw drop.
Anybody else was there?
Were you at 92 at Redfern Park? It was the most amazing day, and then we all had a cup of tea up at Town Hall, and everyone's given Paul Keating a hug and that. And I said to Paul, because I just treat politicians like anybody else. I call them by their first names, you know, or if I want to swear, I'd call them minister, you know. So I said to Paul, check this out, everyone's hugging you now, I hope you're going to follow through with it, you know. And it's just, I always just say to politicians, if you're going to talk to Aboriginal people, get rid of the paper, and talk from the heart, like we do. Why do you have to read from a paper? You know, you've lived it, and especially if you're a boomer. I mean, there's a lot of boomers in this room. I don't call you elders, I call you boomers. Anybody over 60 is a boomer. You have lived experiences. Some of it is like us. We didn't learn about First Nation people except, you know, they were natives and they didn't do much. And still today, they're still using the terms, you know, sexual abuse, domestic violence, all these horrible things, which is right across the board. I turn my TV on every night. What am I seeing? I'm seeing, you know, Anglo kids robbing houses and places like that. I'm seeing, you know, Anglo men abusing their wives. But as soon as it's an Aboriginal, oh, it's every Aboriginal man, you know. And what hasn't helped there was John Howard. John Howard, I call him a little Hitler of Australia. The things that he did towards our people in 2007, when he brought in the military and that into the Northern Territory and said there were pedophiles in all our communities. And I rang up every high-profile Aboriginal man and said, oh, so you're a pedophile. I remember you saying to me, walking down the street, Ray Minniecon walking down the street, and people judging him and looking at him like, you know, he's a pedophile. Yeah. And yet there was no pedophile rings in the Northern Territory. There happened to be one pedophile that was banished from Mutijulu for many, many years, and he was allowed eventually back because Aboriginal law is Aboriginal law, it doesn't change. As you know with Western law, it's money. If you've got the money and you've got the contacts, you can get away. But as we're seeing lately, so many politicians, pedophiles, or, you know, fraud. It's all coming out. And it's not just in Australia. It's right across the globe in the Western world. And as I say, you know, if the world didn't have people of colour, a lot of people wouldn't be as rich as they are today. Because they did all the hard work. And the Europeans, you know, there's no thank you for the Europeans that have come here. You know, you're a bloody wob. Why don't you go, you know, you hear it all the time. Why don't you go back to your own country? Why don't you go back to your own country? This is, people were born here, 5, 6. I've met Asians that have been 7, 8 generations. You know, then you've got people who call themselves 10-pound poms. You know, they're 10 pound to get here. Hello? So, you know, there's so many things that are wrong. The Reconciliation Convention in 1997, they asked me to come and speak as a media person. I said, I don't believe in reconciliation. And they said, oh no, we want you to come and speak. So there was Mark Day and there was Michelle Grattan with the 2 other speakers there. And as I was getting up there to speak, Mick Gooder came down and I said, get out of here, don't sit in front of me. Then my sister came and I said, no, go and sit at the back. And all these people. The one thing that I thought that was going to change was all the different people that were talking there. But the one thing that I can only remember out of that convention was John Howard getting up and slamming his fist on the podium. And there would have been about 3,000 people in that auditorium. There were people that turned their backs. There were people that walked out of that room in disgust. And he's talking about reconciliation. That was wrecking the silly nation. And still, where are we today with all the others? You talk about, there are people I know in this room that would have voted yes for the referendum that happened. But it was a voice. It wasn't a voice in Parliament, and the detail was going to be made up by the Parliament and the executives. What we're saying, we need a voice in the Parliament, not for, because we've got voices all over. We had ATSIC. You know the ATSIC? You've heard of ATSIC, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islands Commission. That was a voice where they had elections and people around the country, Aboriginal people, voted for people to be there as commissioners. Then Howard got rid of that. Then we had the National Congress, and they put in a lot of money in that. Then they got rid of that. And the great thing that was happening there was that they were forming youth groups all from around the country, and they'd all come to Sydney and they'd all sit down and have discussions so that they could learn about their history or learn about their history from where they came from. And then they got rid of it. You know, so we have had representation of Aboriginal people. If you go back, I don't know if you can go back to 1920s, to Fred Maynard. And then we've got the Day of Mourning in the 30s. We've got all these different organisations that were voices for Aboriginal people. Voices for, that were giving it to the government. But we need it in Parliament. Now people might say you've got politicians, Aboriginal, yeah, but they have to go with the party line unless you're an independent. Like the only one that did that was Lydia Thorpe. And people were, well, some people, of our people are a bit disgusted with her because of the language that she uses. She swears a lot, as you might see, you know, but she's pretty strong about what she does, but at the same time, that's not our cultural way of doing things. That's not our cultural way of doing things. And I think that people have got to start to stand up and think of the real history and who's contributed. But Aboriginal people always was and always will be. And they say that in Parliament too. They do the acknowledgements, they do the welcomes. And at the same time, they put Aboriginal people down. I mean, I'm one of the lucky ones. I got a lot of racism until I got into the media. And then I got racism where I couldn't go into nightclubs. And then as soon as I got into SBS, guess what? My white friends or my Anglo friends would use me to get into a nightclub and say, oh, she works at SBS. I went, this is weird. Before SBS, I remember when I went into SBS and we went into the archives. Oh my God. The information that we have there, whether it be written or in video form about Aboriginal people, is unbelievable. You can go into archives at any of the governments and they've got all the information, but they're not sharing it. They're not sharing it. There are people I know probably in this room that do have Aboriginal heritage and don't even know it. You know, and I found one woman tonight, and she said, you know, she thinks she might have. She gave me the last name, and I said, well, you look like that family. You look like that. Because we go on looks. I always go on looks, but it doesn't matter if you're European or Aboriginal or whatever you are. There's always certain looks with every different nationality. So, as I was saying, today, we're in 2024, and the ignorance is still there. The segregation is still there. It's just unbelievable. Our younger generation are learning. Now we're getting Aboriginal curriculum being put into schools in New South Wales. We have 5 languages that are in the schools. We even have a school in Queensland, Mossvale. They teach a language, which I never thought. In Western Australia, they're teaching language. And I've asked non-Aboriginal kids how they feel. And they said, well, we feel more Australian now because not only do we know the language, it's like you do if you come from another culture, we know the names of places, we know where we can go and what we can't, you know, where we can go. And the younger generation are learning. And it's just hopefully, I mean, we've got a lot of boomers here tonight that may have had different ideas about what Australians are all about, but at least you're coming and getting some more education. And also too, maybe feeling that feeling if you come from a European background, oh, you've got so many things in common, like good food. You know, I'll never knock back a Jewish dinner, because I live in Bondi. So, Lebanese, oh my goodness, you know, Greek, all these different foods that we have here. Otherwise, if we didn't invite you over here, we'd be living on mashed potato and sausages and fish and chips, you know. So I just wanted to say I'm really pleased that you're here, that you've come to maybe get a bit more understanding. With myself, as I said, I'm a mixture. I have history, but it's not all good. I've got a statue of my great-great-grandmother in Mackay at the Leap, where they've done it in a lot of places around the country where they pushed Aboriginal people off the Leap. She was pushed off the Leap, she died, and the baby, which is my dad's grandmother, she survived. And that history is being told in Mackay there. And that statue, which is a horrible fiberglass, ugly-looking thing, but that was created by Rigaloos, or non-Aboriginal people, and put this statue up there to remind people what it is. So it kind of makes me proud in one way that there is history there, but it's negative history. My father's sisters were part of 3 of them were stolen generation. He never found them until he was in his 60s, and it was just really, really sad. And there are still kids today. Over 20,000 kids are still being removed. The high incarceration rates of our kids. You know, it's just unbelievable. The domestic violence. There's so many things that are not right. Have you ever gone to a remote community? Has anyone been to a remote community here? Don't they live in bloody beautiful houses? Aren't they gorgeous, you know? They're just like the ones in Sydney. You've been into a shop, a grocery shop or a date shop in a remote community? They complain about food prices in the city. Go to a remote community. It's embarrassing. When I went to a remote community, you were to me was the first one, just quickly. There was no skirting boards. There was no ventilation. I was really shocked to see how unbelievable the conditions were. And there are communities that still live under pieces of tin, and like, you know, the boomers, the drive-ins, where they used to plug it in the cords and put it into your car. There's communities still like that in the 21st century. And we're supposed to be the lucky country? Lucky for what? We need for our people to come together. And it's really important. I'm glad I've got to that point where I've learned a lot of my history, and I've learned about European history and the commonalities that we do have, and we need to keep bringing that together. And I think it's really important, and I'm getting sick of people putting other people down. So if I hear Anglos having a go at Asians or whatever, I said, well, why don't you go back to your country? And they said, this is my country. I said, no, it's not. What was Australia before it was called Australia? What was Australia called before it was Australia?
Country.
It was, wasn't it New Holland? You know? Cook got here on the maps of other people. Yeah. Cook never landed on Possession Island. Because if you look at the way they painted it, it's not the landscape there. And if he said there was nobody here, why did they describe the smoke signal fires coming down the coast to here? Like Ray said, they had the opium in North Queensland, you had the rum fall down here. So it was based on, you know, the real negative stuff. I go down to the Circular Keystone, I go through those back, I can still feel the bodies and spirits of people. One day I was walking down the back stairs, and I thought, oh, all these kids behind me, and there was no. I went to Commentary Island, the same thing in the tunnel there. There were school kids behind me. It wasn't. So, you know, we've still got a lot of, still a lot happening here. And thanks to Craig and Maria here, Richard, for putting it on. And I'm just really pleased that you turned up tonight. And I must say to you, I'm a mother of a deadly daughter and got the most amazing grandson. My daughter just turned 51 yesterday, Labor Day, the only time I had a baby, and my grandson is 30. And I'm really proud, and I'm lucky that I've still got 2 incredible branches off my tree, and hopefully one day I might be a great-grandmother.
Yes.
Good.
Thanks, Aunt.
Thank you, thank you.
I don't want to give Paul Maria a conniption, so I might try and claw back some time and be relatively quick with mine open up to conversation. From my understanding, it's more about a discussion tonight to give yourself a chance to, not more, I shouldn't say equally, about an opportunity to speak with each of us and ask questions in a safe space, which the conversation's an important part, isn't it? Being able to develop relationships and have a comfortability to learn the things we need to learn. So next time there's a key moment, like 14th of October last year, the nation's ready to make the decision that should have been made a long time ago. So for me, I was thinking about the best way to kick off, and I've had the privilege of working across quite a few different service streams, a lot of fantastic Aboriginal community organisations, and through the Aboriginal Legal Service, spent some time early in my career with them in New South Wales. Tranby Aboriginal College down in Glebe, a fantastic organisation in adult education. Less fantastic, but important when it comes to our communities. I spent some time in child protection policy with the former Family and Community Services, now Department of Communities and Justice in New South Wales. I had a fantastic experience fairly recently with Dark and Young, the local Aboriginal Land Council on the beautiful Central Coast, which is where I live and grew up. Really was exposed to some really powerful stuff there around economic empowerment, economic development as a vehicle for building a resource base to reinvest in our communities and give our people the quality of housing and health and education employment outcomes that we deserve. It's a key factor in moving, in my view, firm view, moving us towards genuine self-determination. And currently I'm National Director at the ANTAR, which was formerly the Australians for Native Title and Reconciliation. It'd be remiss of me not to mention I'm also acting National Director at Change the Record at the moment, which is, I'm stewarding them through a transitional period. They're Australia's only First Nations coalition of health, legal and family violence practitioners focused on ending mass incarceration and family violence towards our mob. The reason I mention that is not to fluff my own pillow, though I probably should do that more often. It's a nice thing to do. Unfortunately, you're probably very similar, we're all very busy, too busy. It's unfortunate we don't reflect on our successes very often because we're in the trenches just doing what is, in my view, my cultural responsibility. The intense privilege I've had with my education and employment opportunities, of which I just laid out, I have a responsibility, in my view, to my ancestors where I unfortunately don't live through a traditional lens. I don't practice culture in a traditional sense. I've unfortunately disconnect for quite a few generations and a near 30-long journey or fight, I will call it, for me to connect back with my family and my country and my ancestors. A big way in which I've developed an ability to give back to my people and fulfill my responsibilities is through my professional efforts, through my advocacy, through my work, and through my lived practice, and through my kids now. The reason I mention the context of all that, through all of that I've learned over the years, whilst I had to specialise in all different areas, and it's a burden that mob have to bear. We're expected to be experts in all different fields whenever, and in forums like this, it's difficult, perhaps not for two phenomenal people sitting next to me who have had more experience, but I carry a massive weight coming into a space like this and feeling like I have to have all the answers. And in government, it's a big problem. You know, the black face, they assume that anything cultural or First Nations, so we'll just turn to the one Aboriginal person that we've got, not even in our team, but often adjacent to our team. It's a cross we have to bear, but equally it's a powerful place to come from where we don't have a linear perspective on many things. We don't have a siloed view on much about our communities. We do have an acute awareness of housing issues and opportunities, of economic development, opportunities again, of health, housing, employment. All of these matters though, the thing that often gets missed for me and everyone, everything links back at its heart, in my view, to 3 C's. For me, it is community, culture, and country. Always, community, culture, and country. Perhaps the best example is I was at Darknell Land Council dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars worth of heavily commercial ventures, land development opportunities, as a vehicle, which we need a whole other day to have a yarn about the challenges of working in the development space to empower First Nations people. It's a very complicated area. But ultimately, all of that money secured to be reinvested back into our community, to uplift our children, to provide career pathways, to provide quality housing, funeral fund, all the community benefits. Despite my day-to-day experience being really technical and complex and commercial, I knew in every decision I made, in every meeting I went into, it was a legacy thing. It was about my community, and it was about culture and strengthening culture and trying to grow our community to have that strength. That's often missed because we get straight into the fact that we're either talking about criminal justice or child protection or housing, getting into the weeds on the technicalities of treaty, what a treaty is and treaty process. That's important to unpack that complexity and understand things from a technical perspective. But I encourage my staff all the time to hold space before we dive into the politicians and when it's the right time to press go on a particular advocacy because of the politics, or dive into the communications, the messaging, how to say, or what to say, how to say it, and when to say it. Well, no, hold up. Why are we saying this? What's the impact of the mob on the ground? When we talk about self-determination, I love you're talking about sovereignty and self-determination, our identity. That's the grounding of everything. If we jump too quickly to the politics and politicians and the views of Migaloos and there you go, bit of rhyming.
Migaloos is, we say, Queensland, or non-Aboriginal people.
Yeah. It loses sight of what this is all about. And it's important for allies too, to reflect on that and to be exposed to it. Hopefully you've all had, and if you haven't, you should search for it, opportunities to immerse yourself in our culture, the beautiful aspects of our people, our communities, and our culture and country. Because I can only speak for myself here, my view is we're all part of the dreaming now. We're all connected to country and deeply a part of this community. And in another 200, 250 years, all of our we'll have even more crossover and ancestry and shared familial connections, and there's no denying that. There's no point in trying to fight against that either. Really pisses me off, this whole assimilationist mentality of the conservatives in politics in particular that came through the referendum, of this whole vote no for division. The referendum, constitutional recognition is dividing Australia. Let's not get into the specifics of it unless a question's asked later. But it really upsets me because that itself is a strong, firm reigniting of the assimilation policy. It's saying there's no recognition of any difference, and the beauty of that cultural diversity that we have in Australia, that makes modern Australia. It's trying to shut that down and take us back to like a white Australia policy kind of, we're all Ocker Aussies rolling around our pluggers, listening to Triple J's, overcooking sausages on the barbecue, and there's only one really bland, basic way in which you can be Australian. If you don't fit that, then there's something wrong with you. It's just bizarre that's the nation-building project that was strong, I believe, in the 80s, but certainly under Howard, was mentioned before, very much drove that mentality. It sucks, and it's not good for our nation. Yeah, it does. Because ultimately the stronger the different people with the different backgrounds and ancestry, and particularly mob, given our role as enduring custodians of country, the stronger we are, the stronger country is, and country is everyone. We're all touching country at all times. So that's the vision I always work to with that legacy work. No matter the area that I'm working in, I'm always thinking to that future vision, and that's a stronger Australia for all of us. Which indeed is what the Uluru Statement from the Heart spoke to, is everyone coming together in a movement of the Australian people towards a better future for all.
Great. It's a good place to stop for right now.
Good, because that's exactly what I was going to do.
Can I just say, when we laugh, there's all different types of laughter.
Yeah.
And I suppose when it comes to Queenslanders, we laugh at everything. And it's just, there's different laughs. There's that you do. So, like I was just saying when you said it sucks, yeah, we laugh, you know. If something's really like 88, you know, with the big march that we had. But it's just so funny. What else can you do except laugh? You know, because you think, oh, that's unreal, but we'll just have a laugh about it. Because we don't want to take all that negativity. There's enough negativity out there, so we need to take it out of us. And it's when people say, why are you laughing? And I said, well, because it's just ridiculous, isn't it? What's the use of... We were brought up not to swear. We were brought up to laugh. Laugh at everything, yeah, but no, thank you.
And it brings the joy back into life, even if it's so hard and ridiculous.
We have terms for non-Aboriginal people. As we said, Migaloo is Queensland. They say Gubbars here. We say in Victoria we say Gubbars. In South Australia, there's all different for the different language, but it's just a normal thing for the main areas. So you've got in South Australia you've got Gunyas, which I thought was really weird because we had this term Gunung in Queensland. I don't know if you know what Gunung is. You do, don't you? Yeah, Gunung is poo. Oh. So it was Gunyan, and then in Western Australia, which a lot of non-Aboriginal people, when they say they're from Western Australia, especially from Perth, I say, oh, you're Wantula? And they go, yes, I'm Wantula. And then if you come from New Zealand, you're a Pakeha. But they're not bad terms, it's just saying that you're a non-Aboriginal person. So if you hear these terms, it's, you know...
Don't feel offended.
Yeah, don't feel offended. Yeah, just feel cool, yeah.
Okay, what we want to do now is we have a break, and then when we come back together, we want to cover those two questions. What has struck you and what you have heard so far? What was somehow resonated or challenged you or whatever? And then the second part is, why was it important, or how do we move forward now into actions or a question? And you will summarize it and put up some questions, and then the presenters will respond to it, so that they make sure in what they are saying is exactly interesting to you. So it's your questions that they can talk about more then. Okay, so have a break now, 10 minutes, and then we come back.
The big question is, which extractive industry would you stop first? This is a classic climate crisis question for this region. We know that the fossil fuel industry is the major cause of the climate crisis in this region, and it does create a huge big problem for the ozone layer, for CO2, all of these kinds of things that we know that the science has already alerted us to. And we know that the planet is heating up. We know that the Paris Agreement on 1.5 is very close. We might be crossing over that threshold very soon. We know that in the Pacifics we're seeing huge big climate activities that cannot be controlled by human endeavours anymore, with all of the countries going underwater, Kiribati, those ones, as well as the Torres Straits. And the sea levels there are rising up, I think it's since the 1970s, about 8 inches, which is creating huge big issues. I know the Vanuatu government has taken a case to the IJC to have a case against Australia because of the extractive industries that we have here, coal mainly. And they won that case, and so too did the Torres Strait Islanders win that case too. This is the challenge, this is the problem. I was at COP26 when these issues were discussed. Of the final day at the conference, the whole of that conference, the whole 140 nations, agreed that they would phase out fossil fuels, okay? That was the decision they made. 10 minutes or 15 minutes before that decision was made, two major countries approach the president and says, we can't vote on this until you change this language in I think it was Article 20 of those decisions that were made. And it was to do with fossil fuel that they would say that the article said that we would phase out, the whole of the world said we would phase out fossil fuels. These two countries says, no, we won't vote for that. And so the decision was made by them that they would phase down fossil fuels. Wow. Okay? See the language? See the power? Those two countries were China and India. At the last COP over here in Dubai, the same question was put again to phase out. This is what the country needs, this is what the world needs, this is what the people of the Pacific needs, is the phasing out of fossil fuels. The decision that they made was, because it's a petroleum country over there in Dubai, they rely a lot on us buying their fuels. And so they said, no, we won't phase out or phase down, we would transition away from fossil fuels. So the power is in the language. And we haven't got the power to change that language at this particular stage. And so when you're asking this question in terms of the which extractive industries would stop first, we know as human beings that if we don't stop the fossil fuel industry from doing it, continuing its rampant rage across the world in all countries, then we will be in a much more deeper thing down the track. And we can't do what we're doing. We have to change, and we have to change quickly. What I would say to us as Australians is that we need to get a little bit more knowledge and know-how as to what the issues are for us in this country around the whole of the climate crisis. The World Economic Forum has given us, I think, about 10 risks for the whole world. The top one is climate crisis. War is its 7th. The second one is very interesting. It's about fake news. Because we don't know now what truth is. And so how do we know that fossil fuels, for example, are creating all of this other stuff here, or any other industries? And so we can say what we're saying here, but at another level, there's these other big political ploys and plays that are at risk, that put us all at risk, whether we like it or not, whether we're Indigenous or not. It doesn't matter if we get land rights or not, or if we're in sovereignty or not. I've got a great-great-grandson now, and I know that if I don't fight for him, he's not going to have a future.
Thank you.
Okay. I've got one here, helping young people, next generation, what do we need to do? And the other one was, which goes with it, how can we include more Aboriginal culture and language in education? Well, it's already there. It's already started in New South Wales. It's been put into the curriculum, Aboriginal studies, languages, there's 5 languages already in the schools, as I said before. And the other side of it is, if people come from different backgrounds, they should be proud of who they are, without having to so-called assimilate, what that horrible word assimilate means. But it's giving people that idea, because I know a lot of boomers have forgotten where they came from, or they don't know where they came from. And I think it's really important to find out where you came from, what your culture was, bringing it back into this, as I said, and finding out the similarities we have, and what makes Australia such a great country, because we have all these incredible people that have come here to make it the country it should be. And it's just like, the boomers, you don't know Planet of the Apes. You've seen the movie The Planet of the Apes? It's already telling us some of the future of what happened there. Because their whole thing was 8 shall not kill 8, but what did the humans do? And they're talking about that in the 20th and the 21st century. It's all there. I'm a Trekkie fan, Next Generation. You know, it's all there. When we started off with Boomers, hey, Dick Tracy on the shoe phone. Then we had the Jetsons with the flying cars, the round vacuum cleaners and technology. You know, she used to get up in the morning and put a mask on. So because you'd be talking, it should be zooming in the morning. So it's always been there, but no one's really listening. I just take it as a movie. But I take it as it's our reality. Because it's all there and it's showing us. So somebody back there, the aliens back there, the extraterrestrials, were trying to tell humans what was going to happen. And the same as artificial intelligence. You know, with Next Generation, they've got Data, who's the android. Now, he's a good fellow. But the man that created him made another one who was an evil one. So it gave us the balance. So if we start thinking of that, this is what our reality is going to be. And our kids are going to be a lot different to what the boomers were, that forced you into assimilation. We shouldn't be forced into assimilation. We should be proud of who we are, where we came from, and what made us who we are. And some people came from horrific backgrounds, but they survived. They survived, like my brother here. My brother here just telling me a story about his background. I remember I was just saying, we had learning from different Europeans. We had a woman who was from Latvia and she came to live with us after her marriage broke up. And it was the first time, this was in the 60s. And she got milk and she put it into a plastic jug and stuck it on the windowsill. And we go, what are you doing? That milk's going to go off. And she said, oh no, that's yogurt. And we said, what's yogurt? What's yogurt? And then she said, once it gets all, together, then we put a bit of sugar in it. And there's all these other things. We need to be aware and be proud of who we are. We're all Australian. We're a multicultural country, and we should stay that way. And be proud rather than, you're not going to be English. I'm not going to be English. Oh, I've got English blood in it, that's right. Got a bit of DNA that people are eczema, dermatitis and asthma. Yes, but no, this is what I think with our young people, the next generation done. We've got to make them feel proud of who they are, but they're still Australian. We're born here, but my language, it's really, I can speak other people's languages. When I do multicultural, it's Mandarin, ni hao mai, or if it's French, it's bonjour, or buongiorno, or Spanish, hola, como está, whether it be Portuguese, oi, tudo bem, what else is there? And I can do all those, but when it comes to Aboriginal languages, it's really hard. Yama here, and there's others, but it makes people proud. I know when I say that to Europeans or other people, they've got a big smile on their face because I've given them an acceptance of who they are rather than go back to your own country. But there was another one there, why are we removing more Indigenous children? Because they still want to assimilate us. And I've met a lot of stolen generation over my years of working in the media. And I go by faces. So I've met people who don't know who they are. I'll say, what's your last name? I'll go, yeah, well, this is your aunt and this is your uncle and they live here. And it's like, what? So, this is terrible. We've got over 20,000 more kids that are being removed from homes. Think of the mental trauma that is for people. But we've also got non-Aboriginal kids being removed too. But do the non-Aboriginal population care about that? Do they care about their kids being incarcerated? No. But ours are, We're all human and we've all got to start thinking in a different way. And like I said, we've got grandparents here that can talk to their grandkids and say, you're special because you're going to understand the history. And maybe you need to tell the stories of why you came here and the horrific beginnings that you had. And I think that's really important because some people, they say, oh no, that happened years ago. No, your grandkids need to know. Need to know where they came from and how lucky they are today and how we are in this beautiful multicultural country that we all call home.
Yes.
Just to remind you too, if you want to listen to my program, it's 93.7 FM. It's Monday to Friday, from 9 till 12.
Black chat.
Black chat, yeah.
And always lively, dynamic.
Yeah, the last part of the discussion there around the devastating number of our children that are just languishing in statutory out of home care and juvenile detention centres. It's, words don't even can't begin to describe how devastating that is. They're our legacy, they are our future. So the fact that gap's widening, if any more, and you are right, absolutely, more kids are being removed than ever before. It's like I said, these are my questions, I won't speak that, but what I will say is I have a firm view the solution there lies with our people. Our people aren't the problem. Our kids sure as hell aren't the problem. It's the system, it's the history of this nation, and still today the policies and mindset and the approach of contemporary Australia to understanding our people and our kids and our worldview and our culture and responding to that appropriately. So the solution, when I say it's with our people, it's community-based, community-led support services, particularly familial support, early on, preventative, targeted early intervention. The money needs to be pumped into those areas, not into the statutory response. My colleagues and I used to liken our role in child protection as the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. It's horrible imagery, but it is genuinely the way the system's set up. Build more custodial facilities that money can be pumped into, particularly if they're privatised. And you might have seen just recently, I think CERD, or there's some private correctional facility that's just locked up about 174 or 200 inmates for 20 odd days because there was a physical violence incident, and there's a class action being brought against them because it's just farcical the way things are going in some areas. And unfortunately the money, I often think the money is what's driving all this decision making. It comes down to mitigating liabilities, making decisions on the basis of trying to reduce potential liabilities of lawsuits and otherwise maximising profits. And it's incredibly pessimistic, and I hate talking in that way, but the more I learn of politics and government machinations and society and the way it works, unfortunately it's not too far away, the dollar sign, from all these decisions. When what we're talking about is humanity, we're talking about kids' lives. It's the essence of what the hell we're all doing here, is my sense of it. And I could probably say that pretty confidently, because I should have mentioned earlier, I've got a 2-week-old baby at home. I've just I left home with poor old mum who's white-knuckling life at the moment. And that's what it's all about. Almost teared up, each time to look down and see the beautiful statue, that's what you call it down there, carving. I said community, culture and country, sculpture, thank you, sculpture.
Danny Eastwood is one of the people, and we had Jamie and Trevor, his sons, speak in the last session.
Great, yeah. And when I say community, culture and country, that the kids are right in there as well, children, I think that's 4 C's. Dex.
Okay, some more questions.
I think we've got to...
Just one really critical point in amongst that particular question. In the Northern Territory, the new government is going to try and reduce the age of criminal responsibility from 12 to 10.
Yeah. It's abhorrent. It's clearly a government that's prepared to walk away, turn its back on some of the most vulnerable individuals in society. It's I know we don't like swearing, but unfortunately I'm going to. It's batshit crazy. I'm really concerned about this conservative uprising, and largely on the back of, look, I actually think it links back to Trump's first election, and that sort of protectionist kind of mentality of we've divested too much interest to emerging economies. We've brought up too many areas that have had less than the growing Western world and America, and from that point we've seen this kind of, okay, let's in-house things again. Let's start worrying about ourselves first, growing our own wealth base, and you're seeing less people capable, I think, of showing empathy to others. Because I can understand a lot of us, even those relatively privileged, are struggling day to day. The cost of living and the disparity between the wealthy and the not wealthy, it's growing. So we're asking individuals, so this goes to my question, which I didn't answer, was how is it possible to combat the complacency of non-Indigenous people? I go quickly to anger because of the reality that we're facing for my people, but I have to keep on myself, oh God, everyone's struggling. The vast majority of people, and those that constitute the change that needs to be made, the individuals that are equally struggling financially and struggling with their own lives in many different capacities. So it's how to understand that and tell a story, create a space where we can connect and see the similarities, and that there's strength to be had by educating ourselves around those differences of our cultural backgrounds, of our challenges, of the beautiful parts of the life that we're living. There's far more similarity and beauty within that similarity than there is division and difference. And unfortunately, the media and conservative politics and politicians, and particularly the media, for some reason it thrives on creating this division, embedding this othering of people, that we're all different in fundamental ways. We've got to work past that. It's about togetherness and belonging, and creating a sense of collective belonging, and redefining what it is to be Australian, because that's a big challenge. I think we've got, we don't know what is it to be Australian. Saw a prominent leader of ours in New South Wales, First Nations leader Sean Gordon, recently, and it really resonated with me. He said a big failing of the referendum. The No campaign almost didn't need to put anything forward, because it's difficult to get up a proposal like that because we don't know who we are as a nation. We're so confused. So there's a lot of work we need to do, and it should be positive. It should be coming together to figure that out in a positive way, rather than attacking each other in division and forcing us all down this one assimilation path of here's the model, here's what it means to be Australian, you all need to fit it, otherwise you're gammon.
Just one little addition to it all. Something you can do, really, if you really are concerned about the ways in which our children have been taken, as well as our children have been jailed. There's something like $34 billion spent in Aboriginal affairs. Could be more now, I'm not quite sure, but that's the 2018 IER report. I'm worth $44,000 to somebody. Now, if you want to do something, why don't you write to your government, harass them every day to say, where is that Aboriginal money being spent on? Because it's not being spent on us. And ask the question, is it being spent on more police, more jails, more prisons, private jails? And why is that so? Is there a brain in our government that can do something very innovative for our children and for our other, for our prisons? If you can do that, you'd be doing us, your country, a great service.
That's one of the actions we have on the little sheet about actions you can take, because there will be no change unless each one of us is active as a leader. But one of the actions is talk to your state politicians, federal politicians, and councillors. And that's one of the pushing questions that you can ask very nicely, but you don't let go.
Don't ask him nicely.
But nicely at first, but you're pushing the more to get the cause behind it.
I've got one here about what are the signs of hope that I see. It's a challenging question, but my wife and I, we've started a private Aboriginal school some 17 years ago now. It was a different model school, and we stuck our school inside another private school so that we could feed off the resources that are in there. It's a St Andrew's Cathedral school, so it's it's got money coming in the door all the time. And I know that there's big arguments over private, Catholic, public sector schoolings and all that kind of silly stuff. And it'll go on. All I'm worried about is making sure that our children in the inner city here get access to the best education they can get, so that they can aspire to what they have. We've had 150 children go through there. We have now, I think, our first couple of PhDs. We've got one student that we sent over to Cambridge, and their career paths are now on track. Now, we know that that's only a small cohort of young people getting this opportunity. But that's the responsibility that my wife and I took to make sure that we could do that. Now, you can have arguments galore with me, but I don't want to hear your arguments anymore. I just want these children to thrive. That's my responsibility, and that's what I take very seriously. I do work in other areas of the country. I've got programs up in the Northern Territory that just try to get children to school. And if they don't go to school, they're not going to read. And I've got older, their parents asking me, can you teach me how to read? What a question. And now we're working out some innovative ways of helping them to find a way that they can learn to read. So there's signs of hope. And there are good programs that can help those men there learn those skills of how to read. And we know the politics of education are just absolutely stupid in this country. And we've got stupid politicians as well. And we've got stupid journalists who try to bring this stuff up, but with no solutions. They just want to make a political statement. And I'm not interested in that anymore. I don't think we should be. We should be interested in making sure that our children get the best quality education at their school. And if those teachers aren't doing it, then ship them off and put people in there who will make it happen. Because your children have we have the responsibility, but their children have the aspirations of wanting to get a good education. So that's my hope, is in our next generation and in the aspirations that they have and the opportunities that we can give them to get that opportunity to actually aspire to something greater than they've ever imagined for themselves.
Unfortunately, we need to bring it to a close. So some of the questions didn't get a full answer, but hopefully indirectly you felt you got a bit of a response to that question anyway, in the wonderful responses that we heard from everybody. It seems like it's one of the
It's just, sorry, it's a 2-second thing. It's a bit of a plug from a brother. So Thomas Mayo, he has a book. I'll give his book a little plug. It just came out recently. Always was, always will be if you haven't gotten it. I've managed to burn through it. I'm not good with big books. It takes me 10 years to read. This thing was a nice, concise little, punchy way of talking about post-referendum, current circumstance, hope. The reason his uncle was talking to hope in that question, there's a great chapter on, and Thomas is big on that as well, that incubating hope and the importance of that. Great, because I will just quickly burn that. I hope you won't be upset with me for doing this. There's a section, and it answers one of my questions. Where do we go now post-referendum? In Thomas's view, the key things are continuing conversations, a la what we're doing now, become familiar with First Nations people, history and culture, advocate for changes to place names and memorials. Naming is incredibly important. It goes to identity, similar language. Acknowledgement of country on your property, which is acknowledgement of country generally. Support truth-telling generally, but he says specifically in relation to massacres in local area. I will give a caveat that that's some sensitivities with that, so do that obviously very closely in conjunction with your local law that you're related to, that you're connected to in the country that you're on. Show up for justice and recognition, incredibly important. Join the Raise the Age campaign, particularly as governments are backpedalling. Victoria as well, they promised 14, they backpedaled to 12. It's better than 10, but it's not 14. Queensland, God, let's not start for that. Combine your power, join an organisation, reconciliation group perhaps. Record and share your truth. I think that's a big one. It's not all about our mob, it's about, a lot of discussion here has been about ancestry generally. We've all got identities and deep links back to beautiful histories. So we need to start bringing that more into the Australian identity and drawing strength from that. Our culture, contemporary Australian culture, shouldn't just manifest from 1788 onwards. That's ridiculous. Recycle your Yes campaign merch, teach your children, make your vote count. So yeah, there's a bit of a pitch for it. I think it's a pretty great read.
Yeah, very good.
Just another thing I want to say, the term Indigenous. Now, Indigenous in your dictionary means person born of the land. So that means all your kids are Indigenous. So that's why we always say first people of this, or we ask the mob, who's the mob, where do you come from? And I think we need to change that. I mean, some people say because Canada uses First Nation people, they also use Aboriginal. In Taiwan, they use Aboriginal. because they have Aboriginal people there. You know, I think they've got about 16 First Nation people, and whether China says it belongs to China, but there are about 16 Aboriginal clans in Taiwan. So I think if we can hopefully get you to change and say First Nation or the people that you're talking about, the different mob, I think it's really important. And then also to learn your own background. So thank you all very much for coming along. And I think it's really important, as I said, that people embrace who they are, but they're still Australian, but you come from an amazing background as well. And that hopefully our future, and I know our younger generations, will be a lot better because they're embracing it and they're feeling more Australian because they're learning about the country. Because a lot of people in the middle ages, they haven't got a clue. Haven't got a clue what's going on. So, like I said, thank you for inviting me here tonight. And for my, to Ray, Pastor Ray.
Thank you for...
and our brother over here.
Thank you for all these wonderful people who really complimented each other so very well. And we have a personal connection to each one of them. Like Sorry Day, the first Sorry Day in Sydney, that's where you played a big role, and of course with the Cansdale boys and the diggers and all thousands of things. And then ANTAR gave us such a highlight about really enabling voice to be heard, the voices of the indigenous people, and nothing works in reconciliation until you listen to the voices of the others. And you were always such an encouraging person for looking at the bigger dynamic view and addressing courageously in many public events, the only reporter on the scene who addressed courageously the underlying issues. Yes, you did. Amazing. And I thought one thing I wanted to say. Please help us clean up a little bit or reset the room. And the conversation of, like you said, community, culture, and country connects us all and need to continue every day, but in particular, hopefully for us, in the next 3 weeks on Wednesday nights. You will be surprised. There will be wonderful people, different and yet continuing the conversation. Now, I wanted to finish with this leadership because every one of us needs to be a leader. And I happened to find from Ray Minniecon a way of stating what leadership requires. And my grandson, in this case, is going on a rites of passage right now, and I put this on a special thing I made for him because he, with his almost 14 years, is also going to be a leader. The leader you were talking about for the indigenous community is also him. So Ray stated what leadership means. It's collaboration without subordination. It's appreciation of difference without bias or inequality. It's tolerance and respect for customs and cultures of other people, and deep valuing of the past and sincere, pragmatic hope for the future. Let us all be leaders and continue this journey of this leadership. Thank you for setting us the example that will go on and on. Did we do? Did we go? Means thank you. Can everybody say, did we go? Did we go? And the other word is bayandu, which is sort of farewell. Bayandu. Bayandu. Okay. You know